Hi, everybody. Welcome to Truth Teller Tales. I'm Ellen, and I am dedicated to interviewing those truth seekers who are truth tellers in this most incredible time to be alive. And they all have this unwavering faith um, of things that are happening now. And it's just an incredible time to be alive. Today, I'm just so excited. This gentleman is so smart. He's funny. He's got amazing information. He's built a media conglomerate kind of that and so he's just so busy, and the fact that he's taken time to talk to me, I'm just over the moon. Josh Reid, woo, how are you?
I'm good, Ellen. How are you?
Oh my gosh, I'm good. This is just so awesome. Was telling you before we started recording, I have watched you for years, and your energy and the people that you interview and your information, and you have a daily dose, and then you have other shows, and you built this amazing thing, and it's incredible, and I'm so proud of you, and I just think your information and everything is so wonderful. So thank you for taking time to be here with me.
Well, I appreciate your tenacity in getting me on because I know that we both have busy schedules. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm just gonna get right to it because I know how busy you are. Um, and I'm just so excited to hear you tell me things. So first, before we get started, in case there's anyone that doesn't know you, tell us what you're doing right now.
So right now, man, a busy schedule. I got the Red Pill Project, which I host a show, The Daily Dose, on 5 days a week. I had another show called Conversation on the Fringe, but I brought another host in to take care of that just because my schedule is so busy. I'm working with Badlands Media, and so with Badlands, I do 2 shows a week. I do Q After Hours, and then I do another show called DEFCON Zero, which apparently is the #1 show on Tuesday nights on Rumble, which is really cool. Um,
Nice.
Oh yeah, we're rocking it. And then I do all my private content that I have out there for my premium members. I'm very active on X, and on that side, I do a lot of research. I have my Substack. I took a little hiatus from my Substack recently, but just got back into it. I just published 3 different articles, and one of them was actually a large white paper abstract dissertation of cryptocurrency, of quantum Bitcoin, of the movement that we have to make towards the next level of currency. Because even though we have Bitcoin and cryptocurrency today, it's going to be obsolete in less than 10 years due to quantum computers and the AI that is being developed. So I do a lot of research in the scientific world. I have a background in physics. I studied at CU Boulder. I call myself a closet physicist. I just never really stop with that stuff. So
Mhm.
I'm always just going, always doing something.
Yeah, you definitely are. That's for sure. But that's what makes you so cool, because your wealth of you just have so much information. So, with that being said, I want to start at the beginning of Josh because I want to hear your story. So, tell us where you were born and your family, and just tell us how you started.
Well, how I started was it's kind of an interesting story. I was told a lot of these things throughout my whole life, and was kind of like, well, that's just who I was. But later in life, I realized the significance of it. So when I was born with a stuck epiglottis, and
What is that?
so your epiglottis is the little flap that transitions between your throat, your esophagus, and your throat, and so swallowing and breathing. And so my epiglottis, it was stuck. And anyways, I got my first batch of a few vaccines. I went into anaphylactic shock, and I died. They brought me back. 2 weeks later, yeah, 2 weeks later, that epiglottis stuck when I was in my crib at nighttime when there was a babysitter there. My parents were gone. And luckily, it was my mom's best friend who came into the room and saw me blue as ever, not breathing, and beat me onto the back until I started breathing again. So I always say that I died twice, but it was kind of like I died 3 times, because when I was 3 years old, I went and jumped in that same lady's pool with a cover on it and drowned, and my brother saved me. So
Oh my
I
God,
mean,
wait. I have to hear
yeah,
all of these things. So the first thing that happened, so the stuck epiglottis happened after the vaccine injury.
yes, right.
Okay, so first the vaccine injury happen. And so you what happened there?
So I got my DTAB, and I guess what happened is I went immediately into anaphylactic shock. So everything swelled up. I started not breathing. From what my mother tells me is I died right there, and they were able to get me everything I needed to come back, and they performed CPR, and I was fine after that. And then afterwards, a few weeks later, I was actually, if you remember this from the 1980s and 90s, this is something that's not talked about a lot anymore. And I think
Mhm.
it's important to bring back up because it attributes directly to the vaccine injury aspect of things, because nobody was associating it with them. Sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. And if
Yes.
we remember, children were just dying in their cribs and nobody knew why. Well, it was vaccines, people.
Yeah.
It was
Yes.
this reaction to vaccines which was causing that. And that's what happened to me. Luckily, my mother's best friend was there and saved me.
Eh, oh, that's nuts, and that they had to, and just to make your point, the SIDS, they had to come up with something, so that's why they forced all the moms to put their kids, don't put them to bed,
Yeah.
face down, face up, and scared the heck out of parents, and it was the vaccines, well, of course, that's a wild story. So then that, say it again, what? Epi
Epiglottis. It's a little
epiglottis.
flap that sits there between your wind tube and your stomach, right? So it flaps back and forth to allow air in or food in.
And so once so your mom's friend came in and got you back, and so how quickly did were you diagnosed with that's what happened?
I don't know. I was very very young. I've only heard the details of it from my mother and my father before he passed, and her friend. But it was a few
Wow.
years later that I jumped in a pool with a cover on it, and luckily, so it's funny because everybody was at a Memorial Day parade. So everybody's on the edge of the street, and I'm down the street, and I jumped in a pool where there was nobody around. But luckily, my brother Jason happened to see me walking that way and followed me and jumped in the pool and saved me. I don't know. I guess I was a rebel when I was younger, but
Yeah.
I look at these things as I don't look at it as trauma in my life. I look at it as points of potential to where God said, not today, right?
Yeah.
That you have a purpose, you have a reason, you have a meaning, and there's a reason why I put you here. And so I go throughout my life. I grew up in Western New York.
Oh,
Western New
Western New
York,
York.
yeah, Rochester, Buffalo area for people out
Okay.
there who are wondering. And countryside, a small town of less than 2,000 people. Kind of cool because
Wow.
I live in a small town of less than 2,000 people now.
Oh,
But
wow.
grew up there in a small town. I wrestled at a very early age. I did martial arts at a very early age. I played sports, baseball, played football. But really, I started to get into drugs really early. And I had social adaptive problems. It was very hard for me to kind of make friends and get to know people. Always hung out with the wrong crowd. And I got into drugs at a very, very early age, 12, 13 years of age. And about 12 years of age, I took my first trip on LSD. And it completely changed my whole life from that moment. And I'm not condoning LSD use or anything like this for people, but for me, it was one of those things that opened my mind to a whole new world of understanding, of internal realization, of external, like fictitious illusionary reality. And I did that for a very long time, from 12 years age to 18 years of age, to where I abruptly stopped everything and realized that I just couldn't do it anymore. I didn't want to be that person. And I joined the U.S. Navy, and I got out of
Oh,
there as fast as
wow.
possible. And I did 10 years in the U.S. Navy. I went from Chicago to Virginia to San Diego to Texas to Washington, D.C. In 10 years, I deployed 3 different times, 2 times to the South Pacific AOR area of operation, with what they're doing right now, literally in the South Pacific with all the Navy ships. And then 1 to the Jolo Islands out in the South Asia Pacific by the Philippines. And had a great time in the Navy. And I know some people say I didn't have a great time in the military. I had a great time in the Navy. We did a lot of fun stuff, did a lot of interesting stuff. We did a lot of things that made our country safe, and we tried to represent our country the best we possibly could. After the Navy, I get out, and I was married at that time and moved to Colorado because I wanted to get as far away from Washington, D.C. as humanly possible, because Barack Obama was in office. And it's an interesting perspective being in Washington, D.C. at the transition of George Bush into Barack Obama. So I went to George Bush's farewell ceremony. So I met George Bush at his farewell ceremony at the Pentagon. And then I went to the inauguration of Barack Obama. I worked the inauguration of Barack Obama, not because I supported him, but just because I was working there.
Mm-hmm.
And watch the difference in Washington, D.C., the demeanor of all the politicians. I was very active at that time frame. So I worked, I was one of the, I like to say, I was one of the first few hundred members of the Oath Keepers back in 2007, 2008. And when I went to Washington, D.C., I started to collaborate a lot with different groups because I didn't know anybody. I wanted to meet friends. And this is the same time Ron Paul was running for president. And so we did a lot of proactive things for Dr. Ron Paul during that time. We would have various different events, fundraising events. We would go to various different conservative events, Republican events, and talk to different people, would meet senators and congressmen. And then something really weird happened. Now, I've been a conspiracy theorist my whole life. I'll tell you, I remember when I first started taking, LSD when I was younger, my dad didn't know, but my dad handed me a book, and it was a few of David Icke's books, The Biggest Secret and stuff. And I just went through those like they're going out of style. I used to be an avid listener of Art Bell during the 1990s. So I'm a big conspiracy theorist. I'm well researched on these topics. And September 11th happened, if we all remember that, 2001. And I drank the Kool-Aid. I drank the Kool-Aid like, oh my God, terrorists are attacking America. Let's go get them, right? And in 2005, I had a fiance who was a Swiss citizen from Switzerland. And she worked at the time for UBS, the United Banks of Switzerland. And she was in senior executive management. And she red-pilled me on September 11th by saying, she goes, I don't think you understand that we had computer hubs at the top of the Twin Towers, computer servers that ran various different mitigation of transactions. And she goes, they'd never been down for longer than 1 minute. They brought them back up. They're down for 3 minutes, and billions of dollars were missing out of these accounts, like stolen during that time frame. She goes, that doesn't happen unless someone had foreknowledge of that. And that like sparked something in me to like, I got to research this. So I started researching this, and I started in 2008 timeframe. I actually started getting into a lot of the 9/11 truth crowds in Washington, D.C. And we started to formulate mock Congresses. And one of the ideas, if you remember Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project, we wanted to do the same thing with September 11th. We wanted to have a mock Congress in Washington, D.C. for September 11th. And now I wasn't one of the primary organizers of this. I was just kind of a middleman involved in all of this. But one of the ideas was that we had a venue. We were going to bring some people in, and two of the people that we were going to bring in, and it was kind of top secret. We weren't trying to tell people who we were bringing in, was the FEMA photographer that was on Ground Zero on 9/11. I forget his name, but his name is out there. He's the one who, after September 11th, he took the pictures of the plane's engines. He took the picture of the open safe in the bottom of Building 7, right? And FEMA didn't want these photos released, and he released them. A few months later, his wife dies, and they say it's murder, and they blame him for murder, and he takes off and goes to Argentina. And then the other person is where this story gets really, really interesting. Now, during my time in Washington, D.C., I collaborated with not a lot, but quite a few different Republican senators and congressmen, and I met a lot of people. I met quite a few military generals, retired generals and admirals, and these people didn't believe the official narrative either. Many of them did not believe what happened on September 11th. And you kind of get guided by some of these people. They tell you, hey, you might want to look over here. And then check
Interesting.
this out, right? And one of the people that one of my associates was in contact with was a guy by the name of Major General Gurley. And this was an Air Force general who was the head of all airspace over Washington, D.C. on September 11th.
Oh,
And we had him set to come in and actually speak at this mock Congress. Well, here's where it gets really interesting. In June of 2009, I worked at the Washington Navy Yard Police Department. And so I was a military police officer there. And it's a morning, and I think we had like a big rally or something like that the night before. Something was going on the night before. And I wake up the next morning, and it's a DC Metro train crash. And if people don't remember this, back in 2009, the DC Metro, I think it was the Red Rail train crashed, but it was really suspicious because it had 3 different brakes. So it has a primary brake, an electric brake, and a mechanical brake, and all 3 failed. And when it crashed, the main car, 9 people died in the main car. Well, one of them was Major General David Gurley. David Worley. And so I'm watching, and we don't know this at the time. So when the news comes in, I don't know that Major General Worley is on this train. But I do know that, Major General Worley is supposed to do this mock Congress for us and all this stuff. So interesting enough, I'm at the police station and we get a fax that starts to come in. And it's a bolo, be on the lookout. And I look at the bolo, and it's this rough sketch of this gentleman and a story that goes along with it saying, this man was at the scene of the DC Metro train crash. He drove a green Jeep Grand Cherokee with Pentagon plates and had a Defense Protective Agency badge around his neck. When first responders arrived, which means he was there before first responders, and they said he was sifting through the first train, the first car of the train. And they said that in the bolo that when first responders got there, they asked him for credentials, not his badge, credentials, and he could not produce credentials. So they detained him, and they took him down to one of the DC Metro stations. And then the story says is that a 4-star general walked in and demanded his release, of which the gentleman was released with a 4-star general. Then it says the last line, neither of the credentials of the general or this gentleman ever checked out. Immediately detain them if you see them. And I'm sitting there going, what? And then you find out Major General Worley died in this train crash. And I'm like, this was a hit. Like, this was an intelligence agency hit. And I'm like, that guy was confirming the hit or something, like, right? Or taking evidence. I don't know. But so I realized at that time that this is very, very real, that there is a conspiracy and cover up. And if anybody ever wants to delve into that option of this, this really happened to me. I didn't know this at the time. But when Donald Trump came on the scene and he's at one of his rallies and he starts going, he goes, we demolished the ISIS caliphate within 6 months. And, I got to give credit to where credit's deserved to Major General Reid and Dan Kane, right? Who's now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I was one of the first anons or people in the truth community that ever point this guy out and do an expose on him. And I said, you watch this guy. I guarantee he's going to be part of the next Trump administration. He's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff right now. And he's got a very interesting history. His history is interesting because his commanding officer in 2001, September 11th, was Major General David Worley.
Oh, wow.
And he was the flight commander of all the flights over Washington, D.C. on September 11th. He testified in front of the 9/11 Commission, which is still classified today.
Oh,
so the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, so I want people to know this, that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff right now knows what flew into the Pentagon.
Wow.
Understands what happened on September 11th. That's pretty huge. So
that is huge.
Right. So that's why we got to kind of look at what's happening in the world from a different perspective. These people know. And Donald Trump isn't stupid. Donald Trump knows.
Right.
But that goes into a whole other story of how he plays a role in Trump's first administration and what he did and what I believe is going on now. But we're not here about that. We're here about me. But So, I leave the Navy in 2010. I got injured. It's a funny story, but it's horrific. But anyways, I get injured. I break my femur and my knee, all at the same time. And the Navy did not treat me very well when that happened. They basically told me it's not broken, it's strained, and sent me home, and caused massive more damage. Anyways, I ended up getting out of the Navy. I moved to Colorado. In Colorado, I work a contracting job running around the country. Excuse me. In technology. Actually, I worked for McDonald's for a little while. And what I meant by I worked for McDonald's is that I would go around and renovate all McDonald's with new POS, point of sale systems, and new IT infrastructure. So I did that for a while. And then I landed a job with a company called United Airlines. I think everybody's heard of them. And I worked at the Denver International Airport. So I love this because people don't like the airport's conspiracy. Dude, I worked there for 7 years. I had a full access CITA badge to where I could access the whole darn airport. And I've been in every nook and cranny in that airport. So people always ask me, is there a hidden base there? And I'm like, if there is, there's no access at the airport. Like, we search for this thing, and there's only a few points of indication that there's a base there, and it's very hard to tell. But do I believe? Oh yeah, I do. And I got my theories on it, but everybody else is wrong. But I worked for United Airlines. I managed 22 international and domestic airports IT from circuit level to end user. So if you're ever in Oklahoma's airports, Phoenix's airports, Montana's airports, I built and designed those Wi-Fi mesh networks that United Airlines has out there.
Wow.
And did a lot of the work at those airports, at least circa 2014, 15, 16. But then I left United Airlines and I got into consulting, cybersecurity, started working in cybersecurity for a little while, got into business and tech consulting, blockchain, cryptocurrency around 2017, 2018. And then I was at that time in private text messages and chats about Q, right? The whole mystery. We actually started with cicada, with the whole cicada thing, and then we moved on to Q. And I was out there watching these people, these decoders in the Q world, and they would go out there and they'd be like circling numbers and drawing lines and underlining words and going out and doing dramatia and like, oh my god, Q says trust the plan, like, yay. And I'm like, this is not how an intelligence operation operates. Now, the first thing that you have to realize about the whole Q world is, number one, is that it's a psychological warfare operation. I don't care what people say. It's a psychological warfare operation. People are like, oh my God, he really said it? Yeah. Because Side Wars, and by the way, people don't realize I got my Side Wars shirt on. Side Wars can be good and they can be bad. You can have psychological warfare operations that target the emotional, spiritual, and political centers of a human being. So the Q movement, when it originally started, was about waking people up. So it targeted Christians, it targeted patriots, Second Amendment, conspiracy theorists. And it actually did something really interesting, because if you remember circa 2017, 2018, we had diverse communities within the conspiracy world. You had your pizza gators, you had your regular political pundits that knew there was a deep state. Then you had this radical conspiracy world that was primarily liberal. So if anybody knows, you go to the Gaia crowd, or you go to the Coast to Coast crowd, a lot of those influences on that side are very, very liberal, pro Barack Obama, pro Hillary Clinton. And what you saw in 2017 with Q was that conversion. Many of them came over this way, which was really interesting. And that gave me a broader perspective of what was happening. Because why engage a psychological warfare operation utilizing a proxy board of communication, utilizing the Socratic methodology on the American people? Well, there was an idea that was going on right there. I come from a technology background. I come from a science background, right? In 2010, something very, very interesting happened. And actually, the funny thing is this conversation started with something completely different. So in 2010, I used to talk about this with the Mandela effect. The reason why the Mandela effect became popular is because in 2010, the whole network infrastructure of the internet got upgraded to what we call today as the cloud. right? So the reason that these things work the way they do is because you had cloud computing, where you could spool up an iteration of a computer anywhere in the world at any time to function and do the things that you needed to do. Prior to 2010, that infrastructure was really expensive and it was not as diverse and spread around the world. In 2010, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they started making giant leaps towards this kind of cloud infrastructure. It's the reason why we're able to stream digital content on our phones, videos, and these types of things. And I said that the Mandela effect really took hold because we had the ability to communicate instantaneously anywhere in the world through a diversification of platforms. And so now when I say, hey, there's this painting that Van Gogh did, and on the painting, did anybody notice that this bush is no longer there? But it was there when I was a kid, and other people come in and go, oh my God, yeah, I remember that bush, and it was there, and now it's not. Now people can correlate what these inconsistencies in reality on a more a global basis. Other than before 2010, it was less, and then even in the 1980s, it was way less. In the 1940s, even way less. And I got my own theories about the Mandela effect. It's not the point of this conversation, but something. So when we start to look at that, there's another part that happened. Now, I wrote a blog out there called The Multi-Domain Battlefield, and the idea of the multi-domain battlefield is that warfare has systematically changed. I look behind you and I see a book by retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, 5GW, fifth generation warfare. He will tell you this. Right. This is where I learned this from, is that the warfare domain has changed. And if we start to look at all the various domains, whether it's space, cyber, land, air, sea, geopolitical, economic, whatever it might be, there's one primary domain that exists over all of them. There is one domain that everything is encompassed. We like to look at like a singular domain, like the geopolitical domain has information inside of it. But what we don't look at is that actually it's information, and these domains exist inside information. Is that information is the primary domain of warfare. And it doesn't matter what subdomain that you're in. And so in 2010, when we started consuming information through 124 character tweets and started consuming 1 to 3 minute videos on YouTube and Facebook or Vine, and when we started to follow various different influencers in the social circuit, this changed the reality algorithm. What do I mean by that? It was no longer 60 minutes. It was no longer 30-minute news broadcasts. Yep. People were no longer buying newspapers. And see, I think during this time, some great patriots, like the one behind you, saw and realized what was happening and saw an opportunity to go in there. And this is why we had the Q movement. Because you have to begin to transition the minds of the people away from the constructed narrative that is playing out, away from fake news. So 2012, 2013, 2014, Donald Trump has a signature saying that he always does. Fake news, fake news. Well, what is that? That is starting to draw this boundary between the people and the news media, showing them that it's fake over and over and over and over again, and repetitive consistency over that, right? And then we begin to see that there's lies coming out through the Obama administration, that the Obama administration is utilizing the news and the media to cover up for their lies. So that by the time 2006 or 2017, 2016 comes around, people are well engaged in understanding that the news and media are not only fake news, but they're a part of the establishment. They're a part of the criminality and the corruption that are going on in Washington, D.C. They're nothing more than a mouth extension of the Obama administration. And so now what you have to do is you have to feed into people to help them begin to go out there and start analyzing information. How do I look at information? What information should I look at? What type of breadcrumbs should I uncover? How do I connect this information? What are some ways that I can look at this information and begin putting it together? And this is what those boards really did, is they got people. So it wasn't so much about the information on the boards. This is the interesting thing, because we're humans. And I was talking to you before the show that we lost our storytellers. And this was about the return of the storytellers. What I mean by that is people are looking at these boards and they're mysterious, and there's the idea that it's a White House insider. Somebody is inside the White House talking with Donald Trump. We got pictures, for goodness sake, that people have never seen before, only on the Q boards that are of Donald Trump, right? Like through a reflection in a mirror of Donald Trump. They can't be recreated. We didn't have AI back then. Like, so there was confirmation to us that this was really Trump communicating with the people. And that does something to people. And what happened is people started collaborating together. People started talking in the backdrop. We started going on Reddit. We started going on X. We had various different threads, and people were communicating and analyzing and discussing research and information. And then people started podcasting. They started doing radio shows. They start writing blogs. And the next thing you know, we are the media. And that was the whole idea. Is the whole idea. If you go back to General Flynn's 2016 speech, he says we need to redefine the idea of information. We need to take back the idea of information. This was an insurgency, people, right?
Yeah.
We had to utilize the same warfare tactics that were used against us. So this is the counterinsurgency. And the counterinsurgency starts with an information war. And the whole objective was for us to take back the domain of information, which we did, interesting enough, not from 2017 to 2020. We did it from 2020 to 2024. And the reason that that is so important is because of what happened. So we go out there. I think Congress, the first ever conspiracy theory that Congress actually tried to ban was Q. Do you remember?
Crazy.
Congress had a whole session on Q, and they shut down 4chan and 8chan.
Yeah.
That's absurd. People don't know that. But it's like all for a conspiracy theory. No, it wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was legitimate. It was real. It was happening. It was meant to wake people up. And I mean, people, it's like, it was just Mossad PSYOP, or it's a CIA. You want to know my thoughts are for that, Ellen? I don't care if it was. I don't care if it was the Mossad, the CIA, MSS, Chinese intelligence, MI6. I don't care if it was some snot-nosed little nerd sitting in his grandma's basement. You want to know why? That movement woke up hundreds of millions of people around the world.
Sure did.
And produced the whole movement that we have today. The base foundation of what MAGA is that movement. And yes, did it get hijacked in various different ways? Is there injection of disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation in there? Absolutely. Did people get sidetracked? They're like, oh my God, I'm just going to put my feet up, eat the popcorn, and trust the plan. Yes, people did. But that was because of bad actors entering into that movement and brainwashing people, utilizing the same psychological warfare tactics. But there's been a few of us that have held steady, who understood how this information is related and correlated, and how this information is meant to be handled. And right now, this is why we are on target. This is why, if people watch my show, and I have another show with Alpha Warrior, is we're over the target. We're over. We've been consistent for the last 4 years. And people are like, well, how have you been so consistent? Because I understand the communication. I understand the plan and the narrative of what's happening. This isn't something that's going to happen relatively fast. It's not going to be like one day you wake up and everybody's getting arrested. There is a build up to it. There's things that have to happen before that one event where people get arrested, the perp walks, all these things actually happen. And that you can't take down a global crime syndicate one person at a time. You can't take it down one mercenary army at the time when they have millions of them. So you have to set the table. You have to set the stage. Right. You have to take your chess pieces and move them very carefully. So when I look back at that movement, which really defined me, because I mean, we were talking about my story, COVID happened. And I was just in these private chats talking about this stuff, and so mad and angry at these anons that were out there who had no idea what they're talking about. They had hundreds of thousands of followers, and people are like, yeah. And I'm like, no, this is a psyop. These people are being psyoped. And my buddy's like, well, why don't you go out there? Why don't you go start a podcast? I'm like, well, you know what? I will. And I went out there, created a YouTube page, and I started, it's called QAnon News, and I was known as Q Patriot. And I never showed my face, and I did a show for a few years breaking down and decoding all the decodes. And Ellen, I'll tell you, I went from 5 subscribers to 500 subscribers to 5,000 subscribers to 30,000 subscribers to 80,000 subscribers to 100,000 subscribers in probably less than
Wow.
60 days. And that was my
Wow.
first YouTube page, and that got deleted by YouTube within a matter of 6 months. Never got my plaque or anything for hitting 100,000. Got deleted within 6 months. Could never monetize. So I started another account. I got about 87,000 back. And I had that count consistent for a good year until the purge of 2021 when they purged us all. And they deleted me entirely from the whole internet. I mean, a Facebook page that I'd had for 15 years with all my kids' baby pictures and all my Navy pictures and all my pictures that I loved, deleted overnight. I never got any of the data, could never recover it. I was so sad. But they demonetized me, bank accounts, merchant accounts, all of this stuff overnight. And I said, and I came back and I got to, this is a kind of one of those emotional points in my life. Single income family. I got 2 kids. I got a mortgage. I'm living in Colorado, not cheap. And all my income goes away overnight. COVID, all my clients basically, we're not working. We don't need consulting services. All my clients went away. Then at the same time, my podcasting revenue went away. And so I went from just getting by, and I was scraping. I was just getting by at the time, to making nothing. And I said, I got to do something. And I had a choice, and God gave me a choice at that moment. That choice was I can go out there. I can go work at McDonald's, the grocery store. I can go try to get a regular job. I can try to use my knowledge and experience in the IT world to get back into that and go out there. Or I can double down on podcasting and try to become somebody. And I chose I'm going all in on the podcast. And so I came up with this whole part that if I'm going to do this, I have to do it right. And this is where the idea of decentralized media came from. And that we have to understand that I have to have a diversification of broadcasting platforms. If I centralize all my content on one platform, I'm going to ruin myself because I can be targeted and I can be shut down. And I don't want that. I have a motto at the Red Pill Project. It's never believe anything anybody tells you, no matter who they are, what authority they possess or profess, unless you can prove it through your own research, your own inquiry, through your own investigation, through your own volition. And the reason why that's so important is because, number one, is we have to have an open mind. We have to be able to think for ourselves in this world. That I don't care what Donald Trump says. I'm not believing it unless I can prove it and validate it, unless I can align it with my ideals and my values to know that that is the path forward. And there's a lot of things that I disagree with Donald Trump on. And the people that you should be warned about are the people that are like, yes, Donald Trump, yes, Donald Trump, yes, Donald Trump, yes, Donald Trump. The people that are always continuously, everything that he does is the golden finger of God. Like, no, it's not. There's things that he does that are just probably in the best interest of a corporation or a foreign country. That's okay, right? He's a politician. He's got to play that game, right?
Right.
But we need to understand that. And so we need to question the narrative. We need to question our politicians. We need to question everybody out there in the podcast world. And I tell my audience all the time, question me. Don't ever accept what I say. Don't believe a damn word I say. Go out there and prove it to yourself. And that doesn't mean go out there and, well, Josh is talking about this executive order, and I went in an executive order. It exists. It's right there. And the things that he says are right there. Must be real. No. You have to go to the heart of it. You have to look into the laws. You have to break that executive order down into legal terminology. You have to research it down to its foundational level. How did it come about? Why did it come about? What are all the intricacies of what it means? How does it all align constitutionally? There's a lot of facets that you have to have, a lot of T's that need to be crossed and I's that need to be dotted when you do this level of research. So I came up with the Red Pill Project at this time. I started broadcasting again on YouTube. There was no Rumble at that time. On YouTube to 3 people live. The 3 people turned into 15 people, and the 15 people turned into 100 people. And this was the first few episodes of the Daily Dose. And then a few hundred turned into 800, and 800 turned to a few thousand. And, we do well now. I mean, I got a show that we're doing, 250, 300,000 views an episode. I got shows we do 20, 50,000 views an episode, but we've grown. And the reason we've grown is
Yeah.
because we've been consistent. And, you know, we slowly bring back the people into the platform, and you get a loyalty of an audience that looks at
Yeah.
you and they take your information, they all take notes, and then they confirm, they
Mhm.
check box it off, and they send me check boxes, emails with check boxes and say, oh my God, look, you were right. And I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, it's just got to look to see what's happening in the world. And so I've gained an amazing audience over this time frame.
Yes.
And I'm blessed to have the amazingly supportive audience that I have today. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of work, not by just me, but by a lot of people that went into this.
Mhm.
And so we have an amazing platform, an amazing audience, and we've kind of
Mhm.
built our show up to, I would say, probably a very thorough show. And there's
Mhm.
a big voice on X. I mean, out of the millions and millions of people on X, we do very, very well out there, and we get shared out a lot by a lot of big accounts because there's a lot of points of investigation and inquiry that are interesting if you start to look at them from different angles. Jeffrey Epstein is a prime example of it. The thing that nobody's
Mhm.
talking about with Jeffrey Epstein. I've done for the last week, I've been covering Jeffrey Epstein, and
Mhm.
nobody is covering the real stuff of who and what Jeffrey Epstein was. And I mean, everybody's probably thinking out there like, well, I know he's a radical pedophile. Actually, he was less a pedophile and more a procurer of children. Did you know this? The
No.
objective was he was a procurer of children. Now, I want to preface this. He owned two companies in the mid 2000s, Southern Trust Company and the New Albany Company. The New Albany Company he owned with another gentleman by the name of Lex Wexner, the billionaire tycoon of Ohio.
Victoria's Secret. Yeah.
Both of those companies were data mining firms, but specific DNA data mining firms. And he would go and exploit children, like, for example, in Ethiopia. He worked with this transhumanist movement to create a school in Ethiopia. And they built this glorious school, and they brought the kids in. They said, hey, come and go to school. And the parents were like, oh my God, what do we got to pay? And they're like, it's free. And like, wow. And the kids go in there and they say, hey, first, though, we got to issue a digital ID. We got to take your biometrics, and we need a DNA sample. And so they take the DNA and they usher it back through to their companies, and then they sell it on the open market to Google and various other companies. Now, the Southern Trust Company, the New Albany Company was located on an island in the Caribbean that was owned by Google, by a Google AI data center. And so when you start to realize that the majority of the missing children in the world are not necessarily being harvested for sexual exploitation, it's not only that they're being harvested for their organs, right? But also
Mhm.
there's something more darker and deeper, that they're being taken for underground scientific research, genetic manipulation, big biopharma and big biotech. And they run offshore facilities in what I call autonomous countries. An example of an autonomous country, Ukraine. No oversight from the EU, no oversight from Russia, no international community. Another one, Venezuela. Isn't it interesting that these are the 2 points, Russia and Ukraine, US over in
Yeah.
Venezuela, that this is where they ran a lot of these operations. This is why we had 72 biolabs in Ukraine. You had Merck operating out of there. You had Black & Veatch under a DIA contract with Metabiota operating the 72 biolabs. What do people think they were doing there? Oh, they're making zoologic viruses. Zoologic viruses? They were doing genetic research under. So one thing that people don't see with Ukraine
Yeah.
is that there's an entire facility under the nuclear facilities. So under Chernobyl and under Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, there are underground military facilities, DUMBs, deep underground military bases. Under these
Right.
lab facilities, there's DUMBs. And I'm not saying this from like a conspiracy point, like the DUMBs and the reptilians, aliens. I'm saying this from a truthful point of view. We know from World War II records, they're there. And so what is going on in those facilities? What's going on in the, Catherine Austin Fitz talked about the $32 trillion that was stolen from the American people over the last 25 years, and how she has traced this to underground military bases that were built over the last 25 years underneath our feet in the United States of America. And the question is what's going on in that? Well, it's interesting enough that Jeffrey Epstein owned Zorro Ranch down in New Mexico. And it was only 150 miles from Dulce, New Mexico, where there's a massive underground complex. And that Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch has an underground complex. that nobody knows anything about what was going on in these underground complexes. What I believe what it
Mhm.
was biomedical and biotechnical research, because these people were eugenicists and their whole objective was to create the perfect human race. And so they were genetically modifying children. Why would they use children? Adult DNA is too many iterations, too many copies of itself, so it's damaged to a large degree. Children's DNA doesn't have the long duration of age or the oxidative stress, so it's way easier to manipulate with things like CRISPR-Cas9 or mRNA technology. So they'll bring them in and they'll exploit intelligence. They'll test them out and see if they can give them superhuman strength or different characteristics, and they'll do genetic manipulation on these children. And what they're doing is, I think that they're doing various different things. Number one is they're creating an army. Number two is they created an army of Manchurian candidates. And I think that this was actually done through the fertility clinics in the early 2000s. What do I mean by that? Back in the 1980s, through Stanford Research Lab, one of the things they identified was that there was a genetic predisposition towards mind control, that certain people had a genetic predisposition to where it was way easier for them to be influenced through psychological warfare. And what I think that we saw happen in the 1990s and the 2000s, one of the reasons we saw the fertility rates drop was to usher in fertility clinics. With fertility clinics, you can go in there and you can inject these types of genes into women who want to become pregnant. And then she becomes pregnant and now she has a child, and this child now has this genetic predisposition. And all the intelligence agencies or MK Ultra teams have to do is follow these kids around and influence them subtly throughout their life.
Right.
And
Yes.
then what happens is digital media comes about and becomes far easier to manipulate them. So you start looking at
Right.
Thomas Crooks. And I tell people out there, if anybody's listening and knows Thomas Crooks' parents, go ask them in 2003 if they use a fertility clinic. I bet you that answer is yes. So what we start to see is that they have this Manchurian candidate army, but I also believe that there's this genetically superior race that they're building, and they're building an army of them. Kind of what Jim Marrs used to talk about with the rise of the Fourth Reich. I think it's 100% legitimate that it's happening right now, that technologically they are superior and they are utilizing biotech to kind of create their own race. And maybe it's in underground facilities. Maybe it's right now in our world. Even Jeffrey Epstein even talked about chimerization or hybridization. If he ever found alien DNA, he would take it and start creating genetic human alien hybrids. So we start to think about this, like, is this stuff real? Like, this is
Right.
very real stuff, people. Like, this is openly
Yeah.
discussed by these people. And if you start thinking about the words of Yuval Noah Harari from the World Economic Forum, where he talks about that we, the elites, will become technological gods. This is their objective. Their objective is not only to rise up technologically, as in implanting a nanotechnology that refreshes their cells and gives them longevity to last 500, 1,000 years, not only in integrating nanocomputers inside their body that gives them super intelligence. And I'll talk about that in a second, super intelligence. But also, there's this other aspect where they are going to dumb us down. They are going to make us genetically inferior by putting us into a transhumanistic slave state, by doing what they did with this thing, 1,000-fold injectable into your body. That's the idea of what they're trying to do. They want to be gods over humanity. And
Yeah.
they are doing everything in their power to ensure that. And then here's the thing that, like, people say, well, does it matter what Donald Trump does? It does matter what Donald Trump does. And I do believe that what Donald Trump is doing is fighting for the good, and that he's fighting to eliminate and decimate this whole infrastructure that's been set up by whatever this evil is in the world. But we
Mm-hmm.
have a long fight ahead of us, and this isn't just going to
Mm-hmm.
end when the deep state is in jail or facing tribunals. It's not going to end when the globalists, come crashing down. There's a lot more going on here that I think meets the eye with a lot of people. I'll breathe for
Yeah,
a
there
second.
sure is. Oh my gosh, that was fantastic. I have like a million questions, but I know we only have time for a couple. So there's just you have this is why I just love you, because you just can go and you have such a wealth of information, and it's so complex and so deep, and Well, my first thing is, most people right now only see that surface. So they can only see that one layer. And that's the point is to you're talking about the psyop. It's the psyop that we're in is to keep people on that surface level and to keep people too busy and to keep people in a panic and to keep people victimized and all that stuff. But it's so multi-layered, Josh. And you bring up 1,000 points in such a short period of time. It would make somebody most people, it would be too much. It would be too much, and so those people, I think, are the ones that aren't seeing it right now because they can't.
Mhm.
But and I think that there are a group of people who can see it because we can handle it, and I wanted to end with this, but I just wanna say it now first before because I don't wanna end quite yet. I know you have limited time. But I think that the people that can see it like you and I can kind of keep up with you a little bit, is the people that have the understanding of the greater good of a spiritual understanding of God and the greater good, because if we didn't have that, it would be too much. And you have to have that, Josh, because you have so much going on in your head of knowledge. And I'll one just wanna add one more thing, and I've talked to several at this point, people who also understood the Q operation to their extent, and they all, because of biblical passages in that as well, it also fed into their understanding and awakening spiritually too, and so that was pretty amazing as well. I mean, so what do you think of all of that, what I just said?
Yeah. So there's a Bible verse that I live by. And it's Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And so I used to laugh. I used to go around when I was going to bars. I'd be like, "Hey, there's four types of people in the world." I'm like, "What? There's four types of people in the world." And be like, "What?" Well, there's people that live inside of a box. There's nothing that exists outside of that box. Everything is inside of that box. That's a lot of the people you just talked about, the ones that won't understand because they live inside of a box. That box, their reality has boundaries. And those
Mhm.
boundaries are veiled and filtered and they can't see beyond it. So that's what this means in Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. The pattern of this world is whatever's stuck in that box is what is. Okay? So that's the
Mhm.
first type of people. Then there's a second type of people. These type of people live inside the same box, but understand the box exists. The third
Mm.
type of people, they control the people in the box.
Yeah.
Then there's a fourth type of people like you, me, and the audience out here. We realized a long time ago the box never existed. And see,
Oh,
to me, that's like a metaphorical representation of Romans 12:2. Because
yeah.
God wants us. So it says right here, then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And if God's will is transmuted into my will, then by renewing my mind, by going out there and continuously refreshing information, looking at things dynamically through new perspectives and new understandings, going out there and learning as much as I possibly can, I am advancing the kingdom. I am advancing God's will.
Mhm.
Right? Because God doesn't want us to be stagnant. God doesn't want us to just focus on one thing and that's the only thing that we do. And we live in this little box of information. And I always tell people this, and that people don't like me for it, but you have to get outside of the two sides of your book. And I think people know what book I'm talking about. Is that you have to go outside of that book and you have to, it's the living word. And the reason why it's a living word is because the words exist outside of the book. The words are
Yeah.
dynamic. They are all around you in reality. Open that book up and understand that it's discussing this out here. That this out here explains this in here. And if
Mhm.
people truly understood that, they become closer with God and understanding with God. And I've had profound spiritual experiences in my life, and I've been divinely guided in more ways than I can ever imagine. And I truly believe we are in what I would consider to be the Great Awakening. But it doesn't happen just because we're aware of it. It only happens if we make it to happen. We produce it to happen. We create it to happen. And that is a generalized awakening amongst the people that then take the power back. So right now, and this is an interesting point, Donald Trump is he's not going to hand the power to the people. What he's going to do is he's going to put the power out there and say, come get it. You have to earn this, people. You have to earn this. And right now, everything that they're doing, we have to earn it. And what I mean by that is when Donald Trump does something that you might not agree with politically, you got to have a voice. You got to stand up. We've already done it before with the Trump administration. I mean, when in the world have you heard a government come out with their speaker and start talking about things that people are talking about on X, and the FBI director addressing comments that people are making on a social media platform? It's absurd. But the reason is because people are talking, it gets their attention, and now they have to address it, which means that they understand that we hold the power. And we have to remind them that we hold the power. And here's the thing is power. So power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? Lord Acton. And if it doesn't matter who's in that power, if you allow that power to be abused, to be corrupted, if you allow that power to go to the extent of whatever they're doing and we do not check it, then it's all of our fault. And then that power will corrupt absolutely. And I don't care who's in the office. I don't care if it's Republicans or Trump or whatever. It will always happen. There's always somebody in the world who is going to try to undermine the power and the authority of the people. They'll get more centralization of power and money for themselves, right? So, it's us, the people. And if you go to the Q boards, it always talks about the keystone. And people are like, what is a keystone? And they got all these different theories and they throw all these different things. Well, the Q boards actually tell you what the keystone is. It says the key is POTUS and military intelligence. Stone, the people. So the keystone is POTUS, military intelligence, and the people. And we have to understand that the stone, the part that fits it all together, the foundation of it is the people. And that you cannot have a country without the people deriving the power, without the people having their will instituted within government. And I think that this is a harsh reminder for a lot of people. But as we come up to the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, we got to understand that what's happening is we are truly taking the power back from our rogue government. And that right now, we don't have that power. Congress and Senate still work for the bastions of the lobby, for the foreign governments and multinational corporations. We have to change that. We have to re-inflict into their mentality that they work for their people. They work for their constituents. And it all happens here in the midterms coming up in 2026 and the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, and what's going to happen in 2028 ultimately.
Wow, that is so much. And to that point, though, 2020 can't be over yet if we're going to rely on midterms and things as well, because there has to be a resolution about what happened with that election and what was
It's
stolen.
coming. So watch the Southern District of Florida, the U.S. Attorney Quinones. Watch. That's all eyes focus there, and then all eyes focus on the Eastern District of Virginia, Lindsay Halligan, and then two other grand juries that have been impaneled right now, New York and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the big one nobody's talking about. It's not even really been mentioned. The grand jury's impaneled. Just wait.
Well, I can't wait. So back to you for a second. You have so much knowledge and passion. Tell me how does your family know what you're doing? Does your
Oh, yeah.
family get what you're saying? Some do, some don't. What is the dynamic there?
So one of my older brothers was actually my co-host for a while.
Oh,
So my mother, my three brothers are all Trumpers, Republicans, all Christians, understand what's happening in the world. They understand the spiritual world. We're a family that's been through a lot of spiritual trauma, if that makes sense. Grew up in a house where there's always some type of spiritual entity, ghosts and UFOs had always been a part of our life. Like,
really?
yeah, whether it's I'm telling you, we should do a show just on that. Like, I have stories that I can tell you that me and my brothers corroborated years later of them being floated out windows, or of engagements with beings, or being tormented by an entity coming out of it. I mean, yes, that's how we grew up in our childhood, is with these types of experiences. And so we're
Wow.
very close not close distance wise, but close in understanding of the spiritual warfare that's going on.
Wow. How in the world does something like that happen? And I mean, that had to have been fearful of that. I mean, I can't even imagine, you know?
Well,
Because
it's life. It's what you experience when you grow up. That's why I did a lot of drugs.
yeah, I was gonna say, and I can't even imagine it. But so you went through this period of fighting these entities type thing, and then you did escape with the drugs. Why at 18 did you stop? What changed in you then?
I honestly think it was God, because at the time I was very panpsychic. Panpsychism, if you know what panpsychism is um, you don't believe in a panpsychism is that you believe that consciousness is the fabric of the universe. Consciousness is God, right?
Mhm.
But at that time, I remember the day, I remember the event, I remember the moment. I was in my buddy's, he had a big barn, and the upstairs platform of the barn had couches and TVs, Xboxes, all that stuff. This is like 1999, 2000, sometime frame. And I'm up there, and there's about four of us, and my buddy comes down, and I remember he was talking about marijuana. And at this time, if we remember, marijuana wasn't the stuff that we have today at the dispensaries. This was like 1990s Mexican dirt weed type of stuff. And he goes, I just got some weed from Canada. And it was beasters. They called them beasters back then. And he packs a bowl and he starts passing it around. And I've smoked weed my whole life up to that point. And I take one hit and I'm like, I don't feel right. Like my whole, so I at this point in time, I had eaten LSD, mushrooms. I'd been in this trip world. I've eaten a 10 strip of acid before and been in la la land. I took one hit of this marijuana and it put me in a reality. And I'm like, this is not good. I started having a panic attack. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And they're like, oh, just smoke more. You'll be fine. I smoke more. Got worse. And so I said, okay, well, I'm just going to stop. A few days later, I try again. Same thing. And so I said, well, I'm done smoking. And that was it. And actually, I quit. Well, I stopped all drugs at that point in time. And then that's when I decided to join the Navy. Quit drinking, quit
Wow.
smoking, quit all drugs, just because it started getting me sick. And I mean,
Wow.
not going to say that it does now. I have to be very, very careful. So marijuana is legal everywhere now in a lot of the
Yeah.
states. So I'll occasionally have a toke off of a joint, but I have to be very careful. I'll never do it if it's someone I don't know that's passing marijuana around. I won't touch
Mhm.
it. If it's someone who's bringing it out and I haven't seen it and I haven't put my eyes on it, I don't see the vial that it's coming out of, I won't touch it. I typically have to grow my own or buy my own. And then I'm not a
Mhm.
big pothead. I smoke maybe once a year. But it's just something that I don't, I have to be very careful with, because one of the things
Mhm.
I realized, and this is the funny thing. So you don't realize this stuff. I understand what happened in the 1990s now. So my father, he developed molecular modeling software for pharmaceutical firms. My stepmother was a PhD from MIT and studied biotoxicology, and they worked together at various different big biopharma firms. My father actually helped develop one of the softwares utilized at Fort Detrick to make bioweapons. Just interesting tidbit of information, right? But
Mhm.
my father moved to California and started smoking weed again. Started growing weed and smoking weed. And one night he's passed away now, God rest his soul. But one night he took some Viagra and then went to smoke some weed, and he passed out and was having a mild heart attack, and called the ambulance. The ambulance comes and his blood pressure was through the roof. Well, what you find out is that obviously the Viagra has high nitrogen, right? Well, the marijuana that he was smoking had high concentrations of other nitrates and potassium and so forth. And the reason being is because when you grow marijuana in a commercial infrastructure, you feed synthetic chemicals into it. And there's this process called flushing that you're supposed to do at the end of the season, to where basically you drain water through the root structure to get all of those chemicals out. Well, when you're mass producing marijuana, you don't get all those chemicals out. And so
Wow.
it's hitting the streets, or it's hitting the dispensaries, and it's getting sold to people. And those chemicals will drastically increase your blood pressure. They'll suppress your vagus nerve, and they'll increase your heart rate, giving you a panic attack. And so I didn't know it at the time in the 1990s, but that's what happened to me. And typically when
Wow.
you go out there, I have to find cannabis that has basically earthy and organic,
Hmm.
just natural. It just can't do the dispensary stuff unless they grow it there themselves. So it's interesting because a lot of people out there will know what I'm talking about with cannabis. But
Hmm.
cannabis can't kill you. Yes, it can. And it's not necessarily the cannabis, but it's the alternate chemicals that are inside of it that were used to grow it.
Right.
Absolutely can.
Yeah.
Right?
That's so interesting. And what you spoke of earlier. So your dad is, you said, has passed away. Is that
Yes.
right? And it's interesting as we are our story. And so you started out saying that your dad was the one that gave you those first books, the David Icke, that kind of opened up your mind. And obviously, I feel like my dad is also passed away. My dad has passed away, and he's a warrior on the other side. Obviously, your
Love it.
dad is a warrior on the other side, without a doubt. And there has to be those warriors as well for this whole thing to happen. But it's just so interesting to me how he planted that first seed, and how every seed along the way, Josh, whether it was your Swiss fiance, whether it was your, I mean, whoever it was, they planted the seed along the way to make you this inquisitive in the jobs that you had and being in the military, everything, and being in DC, every part of every chapter of your book made you who you are today. And I just think that's why I want to tell these stories, because I think it's so fascinating. And I'm just so grateful for what you're doing, and that you're continuing that you took this route of going back doing it again. You're getting,
Yeah.
even though you were deleted off of everything, and going full force, because that's what you're supposed to be doing. And I'm just so grateful that you're doing it, and I can't thank you enough for being here, and sharing all this. I know people are gonna who happened, if they don't know who you are, they are now, because you have just given tidbits of so much amazing information. So thank you, Josh, so much for being here and sharing your story.
Ellen, I appreciate it. And I hope that everybody takes something away from this. And, I wrote that blog, the storytellers, about the storytellers, return of the storytellers. And I want to
Yeah.
leave everybody with something that I wrote from that blog here.
Oh,
All
great.
right. And this is the spirit of our times, the zeitgeist of our times, right? The hero of our times, the hero's journey that we always talk about. But this is the story of how humanity lost its voice and how we are taking it back. For centuries, empires, churches, governments, and big tech worked relentlessly to silence the ancient role of the storyteller, the one who guarded memory, identity, and truth. They stole our histories, rewrote our myths, weaponized our screens, and programmed our perceptions until we forgot who we were. But something broke. From the ashes of propaganda rose a new generation of digital warriors, researchers, and truth tellers who rekindled the fire of our ancestors once gathered around. This movement is not just commentary, it is a cultural resurrection. It is the return of the storytellers, the rebellion against the empire of lies, and the reminder that narratives shape destiny. The old world is collapsing, and every voice that dares to speak truth is laying the foundation of the new one.
OMG. I love that so much. And so that's on your Substack, Josh?
Yes, that's on our Substack.
And they can find that on the Red Pills TV, everything can be found there?
Yeah, they should be able to find the Substack on the Red Pill TV. But it's redpillproject.substack.com for anybody out there.
Okay. That was brilliant and awesome, and you're just a brilliant guy, and, thank you for being a warrior for us, and it's people like you that's gonna raise this, and we're gonna win, and we won, but we're gonna continue to win. So thank you for being such a voice, so smart and so articulate, and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and I appreciate you. We all appreciate you, and thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today so much. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Okay, take care. Bye.